Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Dalton Kendrick. I'm a current Lind intern working at the Autism Society of Texas. And really the goal of this and the next couple of events that we're going to have is really to kind of focus on advocacy, what it is, how to do it, and kind of prep for our advocacy day. That's March 30th, 31st.
31st.
Yeah, okay, March 31st. It's in my calendar, but I forgot. Um, just to kind of help clear up questions that anyone might have, get a little bit more comfortable with kind of how advocacy works and how it can look in different ways. So today, what we're really focusing on is kind of a general overview of how the Texas legislature works. Because a lot of people don't really know how it works. I know I didn't until I started working with Lind and the Autism Society. And then I'm going to go into a couple of tools that we use to kind of track bills and legislation, things like that, in case you're curious or you want to. So like I said, just a quick overview. We're going to go over the Texas legislature, kind of what it looks like, and then I'm going to stop for questions because it is very confusing. And then I'm going to go over how to track bills and one of the main tools I use to track bills, and some other really great resources out there. And then at the end, we'll have registration. It's a QR code for in case you want to attend Advocacy Day, and kind of some resources that we have for that. So just to start with the Texas legislature, there are two houses, much like at the federal level. We have a Texas Senate and a Texas House of Representatives. In the Texas Senate, there are 31 members. They're elected every 2 years for 4-year terms. And the way it's designed is so that half of the members will be up for re-election every 2 years. So it's constantly every 2 years, about half of them, so about 15 of them would be up for re-election. That way you're constantly being able to change things out and it's not as long of a period between people. The head of the Senate is the lieutenant governor, who's the president of the Senate. He is elected also by voters during the election, which is different from the House of Representatives. So with the lieutenant governor, he is someone that you would see on the ballot. He's not selected from a pool of people already elected to that body. And his job, he establishes committees, appoints members and chairpersons to those committees, assigns Senate legislation to the committees of his choices. So when bills come in, he gets to decide where it goes, what committee it goes to, when it gets talked about. And he's also the one that determines what committees there are, and kind of who's on those committees. And then on the other side, you have the Texas House of Representatives. That's the biggest house. There's 150 members. They are elected every 2 years for 2-year terms. So every 2 years, all 150 of them are up for re-election. The Speaker of the House is the presiding officer over the House of Representatives. Like I mentioned, as opposed to the Senate and the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House is chosen from one of those 150 members. So he's chosen from people who have already been elected by their local constituents, and then is elected from other members by other members of the House. His jobs are very similar to that of the lieutenant governor and the Senate. So he conducts meetings, appoints committees, and he's also in charge of enforcing the rules of the House. So making sure things run correctly and things like that. So these are the two people I just kind of talked about. So the lieutenant governor is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He was first elected in 2014 to be our lieutenant governor, has been reelected in 2018 and 2022. So he will be up for re-election in 2026, or I guess 2026. So he's been the lieutenant governor for 3 terms. And then on the flip side, you have the Speaker of the House, who is Representative Dustin Burrows. He was first elected to the House in 2014 and has been re-elected to the House every election since then. And he actually just won the speaker race against Representative David Cook. There was a lot of questions about the speakership this session. So this was a really focused on race. A lot of people were keeping an eye on it for a couple of different reasons. Just people in general, yeah. So one distinction I do want to make is the difference between the Texas legislature and federal legislature. So those 2 people that I just mentioned, Dan Patrick and Dustin Burrows, are the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor at Texas. So Ted Cruz is a name that I'm sure a lot of people know. He's one of our U.S. senators. We have 2 U.S. senators. It is Ted Cruz, who a lot of people know, and then John Cornyn. And then Texas has 38 members in the United States House of Representatives. These 2 legislative bodies, so the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, are completely separated from the 2 Texas bodies. Members in the U.S. Senate and House do not vote on items at the state level, and vice versa. So if there was a bill that's being passed right now through the Texas legislature that you're really interested in, you want to advocate for, you wouldn't go talk to Ted Cruz about it because he has virtually no say on it. Looks like we got someone coming in real quick.
Sorry, we're just taking a quick pause while we have an in-person guest joining the group.
Alrighty, sorry about that. Yeah, so like I mentioned, people at the federal level don't have an influence on the state level and vice versa. So, you wouldn't go ask, one of our local members of the House of Representatives at the state level to go vote on a bill at the federal level, vice versa. It can be kind of confusing at times. But I'll show you a great tool that'll tell you who's who for like you personally, and then it will help hopefully clear up some of those questions that you might have. Alrighty. Perfect. So moving forward, so back to the Texas legislature. Both bodies will meet for 2 years, or every 2 years, sorry, for no more than 140 days. So they meet every odd year. So the last legislative session for Texas was in 2023, and then they currently just started the legislative session for 2025. The 89th legislation, which is the one that we are in currently, it began on January 14th, 2024. Oh, that's supposed to say 2025. Started on January 14th, 2025. I'm sorry. And then it will convene on June 2nd, 2025. So if you look at it, they have about 6 months that they meet every 2 years. One exception to that is the governor has the authority to call what's called a special session. That requires the members to come back into session and meet for no more than 30 days. So when he calls a special session, his special session will last for 30 days. And then if something doesn't get passed during those 30 days, he's allowed to call another special session and those 30 days restart. So for example, during the 88th legislature, Governor Greg Abbott, he called 4 special sessions in an attempt. He was hoping to get school vouchers, or you'll commonly hear them called, referred to as ESAs. He was hoping to get them approved, but it didn't get passed. Uh, so far, with the 89th legislative session, pre-filing starts like the week after the general election, and over 2,500 bills were filed during that kind of pre-filing. And just to give you like an idea of how many bills they look at, last session they filed they filed almost 12,000 bills for people to look at. 12,000 bills for them to consider in 140 days. Of those 12,000 bills, 4,500 were actually completed, which means they got through both phases and got all the way through. But it's what, like about a quarter of the bills, or is that a third? It's about a third. A third of the bills actually made it all the way through. So you see how difficult it can be to kind of pass these bills through. Another point on special sessions: whenever the governor calls a special session, he is the only one that can determine what is discussed during those special sessions. So he can give them topics to like talk about. So like one of them was school funding during the last couple of special sessions. They can only talk about school funding bills during those 30 days of that special session. They can't talk about, criminal justice or anything else. It has to fall within those. So the governor has a lot of sway in those special sessions of, getting things passed if they really want to, which can be difficult as well. But also he can also call as many as he wants. So you can just keep calling them one after the other. I don't believe, and Jackie, you may know the answer to this, I don't believe there is a limit on how many special sessions he can call.
I think that's true.
Okay, yeah, I would assume it would go up to probably the next legislative session, but I think when I looked, I think the most that were called were like 6 to 8, I think, something like that. So it's they get called a lot. So they're nice because you can call bills up that didn't get passed and it gives them another chance to get through. But, like I said, unless it falls in that little window of topics that people said or that the governor chose, can't get talked about. And during the legislative session, they only are required to pass one bill, and it is the state budget. It's a state budget for the next 2 years. So currently, SB1 and HB1 are the 2 versions of the budget that are filed. So it gets filed in both houses, and they'll go through the process, and then eventually one of them will get passed. We had a meeting the other day, and currently in the budget, they have kind of earmarked, I think it's $1 billion for school vouchers. So they've kind of earmarked that in the budget, and it's something that people are kind of keeping an eye on, because they're going to be pushing again this legislative session to get vouchers passed again. All right. I can get to that. So moving to kind of the life of a bill. So when a bill is filed, someone gets a bill filed through a member's office. A lot of the times it will be organizations such as, like some of the disability organizations, or like the ARC or Disability Rights Texas. They work a lot with writing specific items of legislation. We'll work with a member of one of the chambers to have them work through and develop a bill, and then it's filed. Once it's filed in the Senate or the House, they follow very similar pathways. So it will first get referred to committees. So in either house, there's committees that will relate to things like, maybe agriculture, education, housing, things like that. So they will determine what committee those will get filed to. When it goes to that committee, by either the Speaker of the House or the Lieutenant Governor in the Senate. So they're the two that kind of assign them to committees. They will talk about the bill. The bill may be amended. So the committee may look at it and go, oh, this bill, this language is a little troublesome. Let's change it to this. And they'll keep kind of voting on it and changing it. And then eventually, hopefully, it will get voted out of committee. Once it moves out of committee, it will move to the floor for debate, where it's open for kind of everyone to talk about. It's a little bit different. In the House, it must be put on the calendar by the calendars committee. So there's a group of people who determine what gets talked about on the House floor. And then the Senate, a vote of 5/9 is needed to move it to the floor for debate. These are really good places for if you're interested in advocacy of looking at where bills are being hung up. Sometimes they call it bills will die in committee. So they will go to committee and the committee will never pass it out of that committee. So it'll get moved into there and then it'll never move out. Or it'll get voted out of committee and then the calendars committee in the House will never vote it off. So it'll never get to the floor to debate. So it'll just stay there until the end of the legislative session and then poof, it goes by. So once it gets on to the floor for debate, the chambers will debate on the bill so they can make more amendments to the bill if they need. Then it goes to a vote. If it's voted by a majority, it's sent to the other chamber and the entire process starts again. So if a bill is filed in the House, it'll go through all of these steps. Say the House passes it with a majority. It then gets moved to the Senate, and the Senate has to do all of these steps again to get it passed. So it has to pass through both houses in order for it to go on to the next step. So there are some bills, there's a lot of bills that you will see where it will pass through one house and get to the other one, and then it won't move in another house. So that's another thing to look at when you're looking at specific bills is where is it at? If it's past one house, how can we get it to move through in the next house? After eventually, if it passes both houses, it gets sent to the governor, and the governor can do one of three things. He can sign the bill into law. So it'll go to his desk, he puts a little signature on it, and then it becomes a law. And most bills will have an effective by date. So it's a date where it will become in effect, essentially. He can allow the bill to become a law without signing it. So he doesn't have to sign them, but he has up until a certain date, I believe, to sign the bill into law. And if he doesn't sign or veto the bill, then it just moves on. Like last session, they passed 4,500 pieces of legislation. He doesn't want to sit there and sign 4,500 pieces of legislation. Usually, a lot of the times, he'll put his name on really important ones, or ones that he really supports, but he doesn't have to sign them for them to become law. Third vote, it's the one that everyone dreads, is the governor vetoes the bill. So it comes to his desk, it's passed both chambers, both chambers have voted on it with a majority, gets to his desk and he goes, you know what? I don't like this bill, veto. And that bill goes away unless it can be overturned by a vote of 2/3 in both houses. So if both chambers, the House and the Senate, both vote with a 2/3 majority to basically re-sign the bill, then it can get overturned, but it's very difficult to happen. So this little graphic is really, really helpful to me. So if you look at it, so once a bill is introduced in either the House, so in the House, it goes to a committee where it can be amended. Then once it passes out of committee, it'll go to calendars. After calendars, it'll go to the House floor where they'll debate, everything like that. Cool, all right, it passes, moves over to the Senate, where the Senate, it'll get put on a committee. It'll pass or go to the to send it to the floor, passes on the floor, and then they both go down to the bottom where this is where the bill ends up on the governor's desk, where he determines what'll happen with it. So a good example of this, let's see. So let me see if I can get behind it. It's this one. Okay. This is okay, are y'all able to see? I saw the comment. We lost the slides. Are y'all able to see this website though?
Yes, the TLO website is showing, so
Okay.
we're good. We can see the TLO website. So we're gonna stop looking at the slides for a bit and just look at this website that Dalton is showing us how to use.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So this is HB 729. It was relating, it would have established an intellectual and developmental disability coordinating council. This was filed 2023 during the 89th legislative session. But what I like about this one is that it's a great example of how much has to happen for this bill to pass. So if you look all the way here at the bottom, it was filed, then it was read. Here you see it was referred to a committee. So it was referred to Human Services. And then, you know, scheduled, they'll take public testimony on it, things like that. Keeps going. And then, so the committee reported it to the calendars committee, so it's going to move to calendars. And luckily, so this was referred to calendars on the 27th. 2 days later, it was placed on the general state calendar. So it got onto a calendar really quickly, which is great. So it was read, and then they took votes on it, and then it passed on a vote. So then it gets sent to the House. So then the process starts over. All right, it's on the House. It got referred to Health and Human Services, which is one of their committees. And you keep going, keep going. All righty. Well, the House voted, or the Senate's committee voted favorably on it, so that it moves on. So that it moves onto the calendar. You know, they sometimes, you know, they vote on it a couple of different times. All right. So it was signed in the House, it was signed in the Senate, it was sent to the governor. Great, we're on step 3. And then the governor vetoed it. So he vetoed it on 6/17, which I believe is the last day. So it got all the way to the end, and then it was vetoed. So this was filed in 11/16, so which is one of the first days that you can file a bill. They got it right out at the beginning. Got all the way through one house, got all the way through the second. It took, let's see, 5 months for it to pass both bodies, and then it got vetoed. That was a really unfortunate one. So the claim for the veto is, he said it was a duplication of existing organizations, but some people speculate that because school vouchers never got passed, that was held over a lot of legislatures' bills' heads because of how much they wanted it to be passed. So you see how much work goes into getting a bill passed through all of this. So another thing to look at in here is you see public hearings and testimony. That's another way for you to basically give your support for a bill and say, hey, here's why this support or why this bill is really important, and here's why I think you should support it when talking to the committee. And if you're a self-advocate, it is also really, really helpful to hear from self-advocates or family members and people who are directly impacted by pieces of legislature, because, you know, I can go talk on a bill that isn't going to affect me, and it will have an effect. And it is important for, you know, different people to advocate for a bill. But whenever you have people who this bill is directly going to affect advocating for that bill, it is super impactful for them because they see directly how this is going to affect people. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to switch back to the slides. All right. Any questions? I'll pause for just a minute. Questions about kind of the Texas legislature in general, how the process it takes for a bill, anything like that. If there's no questions, that's fine. I'm not.
I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I just can't think of one,
Mhm.
you know, because it just seems like there is so much that has to happen.
Yeah.
But our impact is either filing a bill or advocating for it.
Mhm.
Basically, that's our only interactions with it, right?
Yeah, so that's when you get to, so for the people online, if they didn't hear it, Kenny was mentioning how important it is to where we are in the process of, helping to get bills filed and to advocate for them. Yeah, I mean, even going and talking to, so when we go and visit for our legislative day, um, we'll talk to members of the legislature, and you can tell them, hey, this is why I think this bill is so important to me. And especially if you get to meet with someone who represents you like directly, like you are one of their constituents, you can say, hey, I'm one of the people who live in the area that you service. This is why I, as someone that, you're representing my area. This is why I think you really need to support. Or on the flip side, sometimes we will go and say, hey, I don't think you should pass this bill because of X, Y, and Z, because, it has these effects, blah, blah, blah.
Is there information on the people that we're speaking to, like kind of like public, their private information to see if they have like a child with on the autism spectrum or special needs or anything?
Um, yes. I know we have, and that's a good point. In my preparation for, so we'll have another meeting the day before our advocacy day, and we'll kind of go over specific bills that we're looking at, and different things like that. But we do kind of point out some legislative champions, as we call them. So some of our big champions are people who, have children with a disability, or have a family member who have a disability. And those are some of the most impactful people that you can talk to, and they will really rally behind giving your support. I don't know if you have any specific names. I know there's names I see pop up pretty frequently.
Yeah. And we usually know who has a child or a family member with a disability, but generally those people are really supportive already, which is great. And sometimes it's good to go find the people that aren't supportive and try to help them kind of better understand, like, why is this needed, or why would this have helped you when you were a kid, or why is it important for adults with autism or kids or families. So sometimes it's good to hear first person from somebody, especially when they don't really support it. Or that you might this a lot of times personal stories are more impactful than like somebody that's a public policy person just reading policies. So that can make a difference.
Do we also have the option to be able to email and each, certain ones of them, prior to
Are you talking about like our advocacy day
yeah, like
specifically?
prior to our advocacy day, like kind of telling them a little bit about like a one-on-one basically.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look up, and I'll show you a way to find specifically who your representatives are, but you are always able to just when you look them up, it'll bring you to you can go to their website, and it'll have like their office numbers and like contact. And I mean, outside of just what we're doing, if you ever see something, you can, those phone numbers are there, and it may, it may be difficult at times to get a hold of the member themselves because they're so busy. But sometimes their members of their staff are just as impactful. Sometimes, in some cases, they are more impactful, and the member is the one that can vote, but they have so much that is running through, and they are voting constantly and talking about all these different things that, if you talk to a member of their staff and really connect with one of them, they can go report to the member and say, hey, I had a great conversation with this person about this bill. And here's what it is. So one thing that's really important is some of the meetings that we'll have, I likely a good majority of them, especially because they're in session, will be with members of the staff. And I want to say, do not downplay their impact, because it is very, they do a lot of work, and they have a direct line to that member. So like, I know when I went last year, both of my meetings were with members of the representative staff, and both of them knew more about the bill than I think most people. One of them knew more about the bill than I did. Because she was like, oh yeah, they signed on to the bill later as like a co-champion of it, and I had missed it in my research. And she's like, oh yeah, I think this is a great bill, and this is why, I was supporting it, and I was really pushing for it. But yeah, so members of the staff they're great, they're fantastic people, they do a lot of work.
Mhm.
So
And it's really their job to listen to you too, to meet with you, especially if you're in their district. It's really, they're supposed to meet and listen to constituents. So,
oh, yeah.
yeah.
Can you create your own slideshow of any sorts to be able to present to them?
It's a little difficult
Or at
to,
least a picture?
so what we do is we'll likely use TCDD, the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. They do what's called a bill of the week, where they kind of choose one piece of legislature and really just deep dive into it. And then they make a 1-page paper, which I think I just cleared out my backpack of all of the ones I had from the last legislative session when I went. But those are really helpful because they get so much stuff. It's hard to, you won't really have a way to present a slideshow, but something with, here's the bill name, here's what it entails, here's some statistics about it, here's how many people it supports. A lot of legislature or members really like to know, how much is this going to cost? And there's ways to find stuff like that. Here's how many people it'll impact, different things like that. And then at the bottom, it's always helpful, put your contact information, put Dalton Kendrick with the Autism Society of Texas, and then in 2 weeks or a couple of days, call back and go, hey, I went and I dropped off this 1-pager and gave it to you with this information on this bill. I'd just like to follow up and just to say thank you for meeting with me, blah, blah, blah. But those are really helpful. Letters, explaining your
I
support.
knew a mom that had brought in, basically blew up a picture of her, not, basically her son laying on the ground, like in the position that she would have to change him in.
Mhm.
And it was extremely impactful.
Yeah.
To them.
So. Yeah, and that really highlights, Kenny mentioned a mom who had brought in a picture of her son in a position that she had to change her son in, and how impactful that was. And that's a perfect example of how important y'all's stories are,
Personal
one.
stories. And I'll just add, I know just because I think if people are watching this recording or watching online, I know Kenny's done some advocacy work about having adult changing tables in bathrooms. And so that's what I think Kenny is referring to, is that a parent brought a photo of like how large this person was that was going to need almost an adult size changing table for somebody who would still need diapers, for example. But yeah, that's a great visual reference to say like, look, this little toddler diaper station doesn't work for somebody who's like 16 or something, or an adult. So those kind of visuals can be really helpful for sure. And also, Dalton, I was going to mention, and also to Kenny's question, I think if you made an appointment, you can drop in, but you can also make appointments. And I think if you did want to present something like a little slideshow, it would be better for sure to let them know in advance, call and email and say, I actually would like to bring my laptop and bring a slideshow. It'll just take 10 minutes or whatever. So like if you really did want to do that and it helps you to present a visual as well, you could give them a heads up on that. I don't think I think it might be okay if you just told them what you were doing.
Yeah. And I'll in the next meeting that we'll have, I'll go over a little about like what office visits look like, kind of do's and don'ts, things like that, just to kind of prepare. But yeah, awesome. So any questions before we move on? Okay, perfect. So just a couple of really good tools to use for tracking bills, pieces of legislation, anything that you're interested. These are a couple. The Autism Society of Texas has advocacy alerts that you can sign up for, and they will send information about bills. TLO, which is what I'm going to go over here in just a second, is a great way of tracking bills, where they're at, different things like that. TCDD, which is that organization I had mentioned just a minute ago, they do a bill of the week, and they also have a newsletter where they kind of talk about what's happening in the legislature and different things like that. And then also the ARC of Texas has a really good newsletter as well, where they talk about just kind of different really important bills that we're going to be following during the legislative session, where they're at, if there's public testimony that is open for people, how to give public testimony, things like that. And they've made it really easy. You used to have to go in person to give testimony, but now you can do it online, which is really nice. Someone said it was one of the best, the only, or the few good things that came out of COVID is that you can now give public testimony online, which is really helpful because it helps for people who aren't physically able to make it to the Capitol, to still have their voice heard by committees and by their members about the bills.
And Dalton, I think for most hearings, for the actual bills in the committees, you do have to be there. Sometimes there's other types of hearings that are online, but a lot of the actual bill hearings are in person, unfortunately, still. But you can email comments to your legislators, like to that committee. Like if it's the education committee, you could look them up and then send comments to all of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna close the slideshow, and I'm going to show you TLO, which stands for Texas Legislature Online. It is a fantastic resource. Let me close that one. So if you just do capitol.texas.gov, it'll pull this up, or if you just look up Texas Legislature Online, it is 100% free to use, which is fantastic. You do have an option to make a login, which you'll have to do in order to kind of track things and like create alerts and stuff like that. But other than that, so when you open it, this is what it'll look like. So starting just across the top, you'll have your homepage. My TLO is everything that opens up once you make an account. You can see information about the House and the Senate. So information like who's the lieutenant governor, different members, committees, meetings, things like that. Look up legislation, search, different committees, things like that. You can look at broadcasts, which are really nice, so you can kind of watch what's happening. They have some really great resources, how a bill becomes a law, how to follow a bill, dates of interest is a really nice, a good one. It gives some really good points of like, here's different really important dates, like when does filing open? When do they, so filing opened in November, but they didn't start until January 14th. When's the last day of session? Things like that. They have a glossary, which is really, really nice because sometimes they'll use big words in these things that no one understands. So it's really helpful to go through and kind of be able to see some of these things. Let's see. And then, so down here, you have what's called Who Represents Me. This is a great tool if you don't know who your representatives are. So I'm actually going to look up 1420. I'm using a Baylor address. So 17th Street, Waco. What's the zip code on this? 76706. So I hit submit. This will bring up, oh, it's gonna be a little weird. Okay, I didn't like that address, but once you use your actual address, so it'll tell you, so right here you see US Congressional District. So Pete Sessions is our federal representative. But you have state representatives. So depending on where you are here in Waco, it's either Angela or Pat Curry. And then your senator, your Texas state senator, so Brian Birdwell. And if you click on them, it'll open their website. You can see comments about them. Get that out of the way. Different information, little blurbs about them. Sometimes if you read through these, you could find some very helpful information. Like, you know, if they have a family member who, if, you know, they come from a family of teachers. Oh, that's great. You know, they may support education bills really well, things like that. So I always recommend kind of reading through these for your different members. Yeah, so that's a great way. If you don't know who represents you, it's an easy way to look it up. You can put in your exact address and it'll tell you your exact address is these two members. So going back. Okay. Here is where you can search up specific pieces of legislature. So if you ever hear someone go, oh yeah, SB 14. You're like, I don't know anything about that bill. You can go in here and look up. So you want to look up like education. Oh, let me spell that right. Education, and hit go. It'll bring up any text where the word education comes up in the bill. Different things like that, or like up here in the top right corner, you can do, so like SB 1, for example. This is the bill for the budget. So you can see where it is currently. So current status is it is in the finance committee, which is great. You can look up specific text for the bill. So if I click on this, which this one is going to be super long, it'll load. Let's see. Yeah, see, this one is 1,000 pages long because it's the budget. And someone's job is to sit here and read through all of this. But you can go through and see all the money that we spend, things like that. You can see authors who wrote it, different things like that. Where'd my, there it goes. Sorry, I'm not used to using two screens quite yet. So if you go to my TLO, you can do a couple of different things. You can make bill lists for specific bills. So if you want to, instead of having to like look for the bill every time, if you go to bill list, which I think it's going to make me sign in. Okay, cool. You can create a bill list. So this one is a test list, whatever. And this is for Presentation. Multiple test. This is a test, so you can hit create. Well, you can go through and say, oh, I want to track this bill, HB 14. And then it'll add it to there, and then it's a way to keep all of your bills in one nice, easy place to find. Another great thing that you can do is if you go to alerts, so you can turn on alerts for different bills. So these are all bills that I'm tracking this legislative session. Most of them are related to special education, some criminal justice, different things like that. And what you can do is you can go in and put in the bill number, and then, so I want to know, so if you click on any category, what it'll do is anytime that bill has movement, so it moves from A to B, it moves into the House, or it goes to committee, or there's a public hearing on it, or anything like that, you'll get an email and it'll say, hey, something happened with this bill, and you can go in and look at it. So like I just got one for SB2, which is an ESA or a school voucher bill. That one's going to committee on Monday, or which I think it got moved to the 28th.
It's Tuesday, yeah.
So,
That's perfect, because it sent you an alert that there's a hearing, and now we all know there's a hearing on Tuesday.
yeah, so we know when a hearing's coming up, which is really, really helpful if you want to try and make it there for testimony, or you just kind of want to know where bills are. It's really, really great. Or if you just want to know, hey, I want to know when this is, so, oh, hey, this is filed in the House. I just want to know when it goes to the Senate. So you can go in here and click on return from the Senate or whatever. And you can go in and click specific categories that you want to know.
That's a lot of emails.
Yeah. Oh, so we're in the beginning parts of the session. Kenny said that's a lot of emails. We're in the beginning part of the session, so it's kind of a slow snowball. They're kind of working on the budget right now. And the next couple of weeks, it will kick up very, very quickly, and you'll start seeing things move a lot more. So we're in the calm before the storm currently. You can see specific bill alerts, a bill alert report. So these are all reports that I've gotten. Most of these are just that the bill has been filed, which is really nice. And then you can turn on these email alerts for specific calendars. So if you want to know when something gets put on the Senate floor, you can turn that one on and just hit save. And then now I will get emails anytime something happens with the Senate floor action. I'll get an email for it. Or committee notices. So I've got a couple of these turned on already. Anytime committee notices are made public, so whenever they like make announcements about bills or bills being opened for testimony and things like that. So like I have calendars, criminal jurisprudence, higher education, things like that. Same thing, they'll just shoot you an email when anything happens. You can do committee meetings. So after a committee has a meeting, they will release meetings for them. You can turn those on. So anytime the criminal jurisprudence meets, I'll get their minutes from their meetings. And then a really good one is subjects. So what subjects does is when a bill is filed, it's usually signed one or multiple subject. So it's kind of, what is this bill about? Or what is the general kind of gist or area that this bill is? So if you go, when you open this, when you first start, it'll be blank. If you go to add subjects to my list, what you can look up is like different things. So like disabilities. So anything that's filed relating to person or persons with disabilities, we usually get tagged to this one. So the way I have this one turned on, so anytime a bill is filed, again, I will get an email saying, hey, these bills were assigned to this subject. And it's just another way to kind of keep track of different bills that are filed and just kind of know what's happening. And what else? Let's see. Let's go here. Let's go to my alerts. So I'm gonna open just another bill, Loop 522. So HB 522 is relating to the ability of voters with certain disabilities to cast a secret ballot. So there will always be this kind of general little blurb about them. If you ever want to know what it is, if you go into text, like I showed you on the finance one, that one just looks a little bit different, but typically this is what they will look like. So it'll show you who filed them, what the bill number is, and then it'll just be a long list of just a bunch of different things. With these, anything that's underlined is what's being changed. So a lot of the times, so like one of the bills that is filed is changing language in a bill. So you'll see them go through and the entire bill is the same, and then you'll just see like one word that's underlined and then crossed out, and it'll change it. So instead of using disabled, they'll change it to person with a disability, or change language, things like that. So this is all things that are being changed, and you can read through it and see what it means. So, trying to think if there's anything else on here I should cover. If you want to see previous year's legislative, like bills or anything like that, you can do this little drop down, and you can see all of the different legislative sessions all the way back to 1989. So if you're curious what was filed in 1989. But yeah, so if you look right here, so the 88th, so when it says in parentheses R, that's the regular session. That's that original 140 days. And then so see on the 88th legislative session, they filed 1, 2, 3, 4 different special sessions is what they called. So you can go see specific ones of those. And a good thing, one thing I do want to bring up is when a legislative or when a special session starts, bills restart their entire clock. So like a bill gets refiled in the legislative session, it has to go through the whole process again. Because it expired in the regular session, so it'll get refiled and it has to go through the votes again. But yeah, awesome. Any questions about this TLO? And I can help answer specific questions if y'all wanna, the people here in person have questions about it, I can help cover it. It's a really, really helpful tool. It gets a little used to getting used to it, and I'm still kind of figuring out some of the bugs on it. But yeah, it's great. It's very, very helpful. So going back to here. Moving forward, registration. So like I said, our capital day is March 31st. The deadline to register is March 28th. But to guarantee a t-shirt in your size, we ask that you register by March 11th. So it's a advocacy day at the Capitol. So for the people here in Waco, we'll go up to Austin and we'll have meetings. We'll have presenters, and then we'll have lunch, and then we'll have like office visits. So we'll go meet with members and members of their staff, talk about bills and things like that. The cost of attendance is $15. If you have any sort of financial hardship, but would still like to attend, there is an email to, it is Adriana at the Autism Society of Texas. And I'm gonna drop her email in the chat. Just send her an email, or the people here in Waco, just come talk to me. And we will get it all figured out for you. There is also one thing, and I'll cover it in our next meeting. Parking at the Capitol is, I think we estimated it, it's gonna be around, I think it was $8 to $10, I believe, based off of how long we're gonna be there. So I do want to let y'all know about that as well. Parking is accessible. Yeah. So yeah, if you do want to attend, but there is some sort of financial hardship, that just come talk to me, or email Adriana, and we will get you squared away. We want people to come, and we don't want the attendance fee to be a barrier for them coming. And then, so we'll have 2 more meetings, end of February, and then our last meeting is the day before Advocacy Day, so the 30th, March 30th. So at the end of February, we're going to go over kind of Advocacy Day, what it's going to look like, what to expect, things like that. Hopefully answer any questions you have concerning Advocacy Day. It can be a little stressful going to the Capitol for the first time for anyone who hasn't been. I know I was very nervous going my first time. And then on the March 30th, the day before Advocacy Day, we're going to kind of go over some specific bills that we're going to be hopefully advocating for, kind of where they're at in the session. And yeah, so we hope you'll join us for Advocacy Day. And is there any other last minute questions? Think so. Alrighty. Well, thank y'all so much for joining me, and I hope to see y'all on our next meeting.